Hi, everybody. I'm David Gregg with the Rhode Island Natural History Survey. You're watching the June meeting of the Rhode Island Woodland Partnership. At this meeting, we're going to hear from Scott Millar about the Rhode Island Forest Conservation Commission and its efforts to define the most important forests in Rhode Island.
The Rhode Island Natural History Survey presents videos to showcase the animals, plants, geology, and natural systems that surround us, and the people and organizations working to understand and conserve them.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 2023 Rhode Island Woodland Partnership meeting via Zoom, in which we're going to be getting a focal presentation on developing the definition of Rhode Island's most important forests, in which we're very much still soliciting input and feedback for the Forest Conservation Commission as they approach a public meeting as well. We have a combination of newer and longtime partners who joined thus far. So let's do a quick round of introductions. You can just give your name and who you work with, and then pass it on to another person who's on the screen. So I'm Christopher Riley. I'm the co-coordinator of the Rhode Island Woodland Partnership. I work with the University of Rhode Island's Natural Resources Science Department. Also have a practice, Sweet Birch Consulting, and I'll pass it over to Kate.
Coordinator of the Woodland Partnership and director of the Rhode Island Land Trust Council. I'm going to pass it to Serena.
Was not expecting to be passed to so quickly, but I'm Serena. I'm a URI Energy Fellow with the Audubon Society of Rhode Island, and I work in the advocacy department with Priscilla. I'll pass it to Scott. I think he was on the call.
There are two Scotts, and I guess I'll jump in. I'm Scott Millar, Grow Smart, Rhode Island, and I'm going to pass it to the other Scott, Scott Ruin.
The great Scott. Yeah, I'm Scott Rowan, Director of Conservation, right down the hall from Serena. Yeah, and I'm a longtime partner, although I haven't been involved as much lately in the partnership. Oh, I'm sorry, Mark.
Hi, Mark Tremblay. I'm a forester, self-employed consultant, but also active with the Rhode Island Forest Conservators Organization, or RIFCO, the Forest Landowners Association here in Rhode Island. Paul
Dolan, Rhode Island RC&D Council. Doug
Still, This Old Tree Consulting. I'm not sure who else to pass this to.
How about Lou?
Lou.
Hello, Lou Allard. I'm the Urban and Community Forestry Program Coordinator with the DEM Division of Forest Environment. And I'll pass it over to Brendan.
Hey, I'm Brendan Buckles. I'm also with Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management. I coordinate the Forest Legacy Program here with Lou, and I will kick it over to Molly.
Hi, I'm Molly Allard. I am the District Manager of Northern Rhode Island Conservation District, and I will bounce it to Bob.
Hey, Bob, we're doing a round of introductions if you can hear us.
Missouri, let's throw it over to, how about Kate of Save the Bay?
Hi, folks. I'm Kate McPherson. I'm Save the Bay's Narragansett Bay River Keeper. And Melissa, have you introduced yourself yet?
Not yet, thank you. Melissa Hayden. I'm a biologist with NRCS. And I see Danielle on the call.
Hi, Melissa. I'm Danielle Shannon, new to your group. Thanks to Christopher and Melissa for introducing me to your group. I work with the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science and the USDA Northern Forest Climate Hub. And I am now a Rhode Islander. So I live in Rhode Island, but I've been living in Michigan for the last 11 years. So I'm new to the state, new to all your things, and I'm really excited to learn more about the work that you're doing. Oh, the work that I do is helping natural resource managers integrate climate change considerations into their long-term planning. And I'll pass it to Kyle.
Hi, everyone. Kyle Lemoyne. I'm with the Southern Rhode Island Conservation District. I also work in the NRCS office and helping landowners kind of navigate their programs and just providing general technical assistance.
How about Cindy?
Hi, everybody. I'm Cindy from the Division of Agriculture with DEM. I do the CAPS Forest Pest Program where we trap for invasive exotics in Rhode Island's forests. Anybody else not go? I haven't.
John Mitchell.
Thanks, Kate.
Hello, I'm John Mitchell. I work with Narragansett Bay Research Reserve based on Prudence Island. Stewardship coordinator there, so helping to manage habitat and other projects on the mainland as well.
Thanks, John. And Bob, don't know if you have audio or if you would like to introduce yourself if you can. All right. Well, we have Bob Verrier on the call as well with the nascent Rhode Island Wood Producers Association. Thanks, everyone. I think it's worth taking the time for these introductions. I see that we have, I'll just introduce, we have Alana Russell, who's the new Forest Health Program Coordinator with Rhode Island DEM, just joining right here. Without further ado, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Millar, who is a longtime staff member with Rhode Island DEM, now works for Grow Smart Rhode Island on many land use and forest issues. He's the chair of the Rhode Island Forest Conservation Commission, and have our focal topic today is how the Forest Conservation Commission is going about developing the draft definition of Rhode Island's most important forests. And we're very interested in having the opportunity to provide and get feedback and input on that. So Scott, you can go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Christopher. If I can have the opportunity to share my screen, I am horrible at doing this, so bear with me.
Okay. You should.
With all the Zoom meetings I've been to, you think I would have this down by now, but I don't. So hopefully everyone can see that. And again, I really like to thank Christopher and Kate for allowing me to talk to the Rhode Island Woodland Partnership today. As Christopher mentioned, the Forest Conservation Commission has been working on I'd like to call it a preliminary draft definition of what Rhode Island's most important forests might be. So I'm going to try to walk you through what our thought process was, what our legislative charge is, so you can get a better understanding of what this is all about. Let's start off with the Rhode Island Forest Conservation Act. I think, as most of you are well aware, we were very pleased that the Forest Conservation Act was passed several years ago. I was involved with DEM as well as other members of the Woodland Partnership in drafting this. And it's significant because it's really the first time in Rhode Island law that Rhode Island forest values and the need to conserve forests has been established in state law. So we're extremely pleased about that. It also created an 11-member Forest Conservation Commission. And these are the members. This is actually showing you 10 members of the Forest Conservation Commission. One of them is supposed to be the Department of Administration, statewide planning. For reasons that are not clear, they've chosen not to serve. I think it's more of a staff capacity issue, not that they're not interested. And as you can see on here, the statute established a number of different disciplines that they wanted to make sure that the commission had represented, such as urban forestry. We have Christopher Riley, who's a forester. We have an open member who's Dave Caldwell, who's a member of the Builders Association. David Gregg, representing forest habitat. I'm on the commission representing people who have an understanding of land use because I've worked in that area for so many years. So let's talk about what the Forest Conservation Commission has been charged to do. We've been charged to recommend new funding sources to conserve forest land, identify incentives to encourage forest landowners to maintain and manage their land and preserve forest values. We need to encourage forest conservation as a means to sequester carbon and mitigate climate change. We want to try to increase markets for forest products to store carbon and create new jobs. Assess impediments to the expansion of the forest products industry. Encourage the improvement and expansion of urban and community forestry. And last but not least, and we see it as probably our most important charge, is to find the most important forest land in Rhode Island. So before I begin on how we did that, I think it's important to take a step back and be clear on how forest is currently defined in state law. This is the definition right out of the Forest Conservation Act, where forest land means any tract or contiguous tract of land 10 acres or larger. I won't read the rest. That definition has been in state law since probably the early 80s, when the Farm, Forest, and Open Space Act was adopted. So when we were putting this new statute together, we debated whether or not to change the definition of a forest. We thought better of it because we didn't want two different definitions in state statutes. So we maintained the definition that was in the existing Farm, Forest, and Open Space Act. And I'm sure you've all seen this before, but here's sort of our daunting task. You know, Rhode Island is the second most densely populated state in the country, but we're still about 56% forested, over 368,000 acres of forest, 70% unprotected. And our charge is to figure out, okay, what's most important? And that becomes even more challenging with this groundbreaking report that was done in part by Christopher and Kate, that made it really clear that Rhode Island's forests have a long list of important values that we need to take into consideration. So the first thing we did is we tried to establish some guidelines or criteria for how we might define the most important forest. And these criteria came right out of the Act. So we thought that was a good place to start. So this is what's been proposed to be the most important forest types that would frame the most important forest definition. So before I go any further, I just want to make sure this is still a work in progress, and I have to emphasize the word proposed. I think it's fair to say that the Forest Conservation Commission has spent a fair amount of time on this, with the probably notable exception of the urban forest. But we also recognize that all of this needs more work, probably more detail. And before we went any further, we wanted to get the feedback from people like yourselves to make sure that we're not missing anything, that the level of detail that we're talking about is sufficient, and we're on the right track. So let's go through these quickly. So the first that we're dealing with, and I think all of you are already familiar with core forest. This was defined in the Wildlife Action Plan going back probably about 10 years now. Simply unfragmented forest blocks of single or multiple parcels totaling 250 acres or greater, unbroken by development and at least 25 yards from mapped roads. And this is roughly what, this is fairly recent information thanks to Paul Jordan. This is showing the most recent land use, land cover information. And it shows that we have 153,000 acres of core forest that's not protected. That's the light green. The dark green on here is that land that's already been protected. So it's about 39% of all forest is the core forest that's not protected. Approximately 38% of the core forest, thankfully, has already been protected, and that's shown in dark green. The next is the old growth forest. And honestly, we probably spent more time on this definition than perhaps all the others combined. And we want to recognize we don't necessarily believe that Rhode Island has a lot of old growth forest. So we sort of broke it up into two categories. One that we're calling so-called true old growth forest. That's a tract with no evidence of previous forest conversion, such as logging, cellar holes, stone walls, roads, or other post-European settlement disturbance. Again, or a tract that has no evidence of stand replacement events, such as replacement fires or other natural disasters. We don't believe there's necessarily a lot of that left in Rhode Island. There is some in Mass. So we've developed a second part of this, is forest that has old growth forest characteristics. And that would be everything, and that would be an abundance of late successional tree species with at least a majority of the canopy trees that exceed half their maximum biological age, including numerous large diameter trees. It has a complex structural diversity of old, young, and middle-aged trees at different canopy levels. We're suggesting it has large standing dead trees called snags, live trees with cavities, dead, broken, or decaying parts or canopy gaps. It has coarse woody debris along the forest floor consisting of abundant dead wood in various sizes and stages of decay, and an abundance of lichen and moss on trees, decaying logs, and on the ground. And we recognize that a lot of this can be subjective, but we did look at how a number of other states define this, and that's how we more or less decided on this definition. We did get some assistance from Fern Graves in helping us put this together. Oh, we also forgot to mention it has the capacity for self-perpetuation. Now, this is a map that Paul Jordan put together. It's showing potential, and I think I really want to emphasize potential, meaning it might have some old growth forest characteristics. And what you're looking at here is the dark, all the green on this. The dark green is that land that's already been protected. The light green is forest that was forest in 1939, I believe, was the last aerial photo flight. Some URI students went through that flight, compared it to the most recent land use land cover data to determine what was forested back in 1939, what's still forested. So it's sort of surprising that 230,000 acres was forested back in 39, still forested today. The good news about this is that 46% of that has been protected. And again, we need to do some more work on this clearly, but this is just to show you what might, what that forest out there that might have old growth forest characteristics. So the next I'd like to talk about is the most productive forest soils. And those are forests with soils with a USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service ordination number of 3, and 50% or more of that site is forest cover. Now, the ordination number is a forestry interpretation that was done in the 1981 Rhode Island Soil Survey. I was actually around back in the early 80s. I knew some folks that worked on that. During that soil survey, woodland data such as site index, common trees, productivity was collected. We did speak to Jim Tureen about the use of this ordination number. He did indicate that obviously clearly it's old, it's dated information. They would like to see this updated, but for the time being, this is the best available information that we have. And I think Jim more or less said, if this meets your needs, by all means, go ahead and use it. And then hopefully when better information might become available, we could update this. But for right now, this is what we have. I don't have any maps of those, but there is about 146,000 acres thereabouts that have an ordination value of 3, but they're not necessarily 50% parcels that are 10 acres or more and 50% forested. So obviously we have to do some more work to fine tune that. Next, I'd like to talk about the forest to protect drinking water supplies. And here we're talking about forests within 200 feet of class AA waters. Those are waters that would supply a drinking water supply, surface waters, and all forests within wellhead protection areas are groundwater classified as GAA. Again, this is sort of showing you what that might look like. What you're seeing here in the green is surface water supply watersheds, so you can pick out the Scituate Reservoir watershed. However, it's not showing you the 200-foot buffer. It's just basically showing all the forest within that watershed. So obviously we need to do some more work here, but it's just giving you an indication of where these drinking water supplies are in Rhode Island. Next is the Rhode Island Natural Heritage Rare Forest Types. Someone like David Gregg could speak so much more knowledgeably about these than I can, but as you can see, there's 6 different forest types. A lot of these go back to the work that Rick Enser did when he was at DEM, probably starting in the late 70s, going up to the culmination of his career into about 2010 or so. Next, I'd like to talk about urban forests in Rhode Island. And what we're talking about here is, first of all, to define that urban area, we're using what statewide planning has developed as the urban service boundary. They did that in the state land use plan, and this is showing you the outline of that urban service boundary. So it's not just cities such as Providence, Pawtucket, Central Falls. It's really all those areas that have public water, public sewer, and can that are programmed to take more density in the future. So this gives you an idea of the area that we're talking about. And in the urban forest, we're looking at forest land that, again, is within the urban service boundary and is 10 acres or greater. It has continuous corridors of riparian forest adjacent to rivers, streams, surface waters, and wetlands. It has forest land that has cultural or community value. And again, I understand that's broad and can be difficult to interpret. Forest land that is under threat of development, again, another very broad term. And another, what makes the urban district a little different, we're trying to indicate for those areas that have a low tree equity score that we'd like to see the tree canopy of all urban communities at a minimum of 70 or higher. That was done by a study that, again, others are probably more familiar with this than I am. DEM worked on this several years ago, and it's my understanding that that score of 70 was vetted by folks in a study that was published, again, several years ago. So how is this definition going to be used? I think we really want to make it clear the Forest Conservation Commission is not promoting any particular use. We feel very strongly that's up to other policymakers to determine how this is going to be used. But we think so potential uses may include, but are certainly not limited to, criteria for ranking forest parcels to purchase. This could be at the state level. This could be local land trusts. It could also be used as guidance for municipal land use decisions. I'd certainly like to see this incorporated into community comprehensive plans, those areas that they might want to guide more intensive development away from. It can be used in conservation development ordinances. That's a form of cluster development that a town uses to try to guide growth away from the most important natural resources on the site. The development pattern can actually preserve in perpetuity 50% of the land that could otherwise be developed. And a constant thing I hear from communities in forested areas, it's not clear to them what forest they might consider preserving. So this would give them better guidance on the forest types if they're on that particular parcel that they might want to consider protecting. So let's talk quickly about some next steps. First and foremost, we want to revise this definition to incorporate your feedback. We'd like to try to conduct, once we integrate your comments. We'd like to conduct some kind of a public meeting in the fall to get input from interested others. Then we also need to determine what percent of the forest in Rhode Island is most important. That's a number we just don't know right now. And frankly, we don't want to get to the point where we're saying 75% of the forest in Rhode Island is important, because it really diminishes the significance of that designation. And we don't have a magic number in mind, but obviously we want to take stock of how much of Rhode Island's forest are we proposing to suggest is going to be the most important, so the number doesn't get too high. At some point in time in the late fall, we'd like to complete this definition. The Forest Conservation Commission is advisory to the Director of DEM. We would certainly need to get his feedback. And then we'd like to go out and publicize this definition and make people aware of it and how to use it once this is all done. So I will stop there, entertain your questions, comments, and/or concerns.
Thanks so much, Scott, for providing the some context for the project, how it came to be, where the Forest Conservation Commission is going with us, and then walking us through all the different types of important forest. Since there's potentially a fair amount of ground to cover, just for comments, I might suggest that we start with any broad comments about the definition, and then for more specific comments, we could go through it in the order of some of the different types of urban forest, from core forest, to urban forest, importantly at the end.
Just a couple of ground rules, if I might. The Forest Conservation Commission is actually a public body. And what that means is that we have to meet in public at an open meeting in person. We're not allowed to meet by Zoom. We do have some members of the Forest Conservation Commission who are on this meeting today as Woodland Partnership members. But where I'm going with this is that somebody could come up with a great idea, and unfortunately, I'm not able to speak for the Forest Conservation and say, great idea, we're going to incorporate that next comment. So all of your comments are going to need to go back to the Forest Conservation Commission, and we're going to have to sort through them again at a designated meeting to determine how we're going to address your comments. Sorry for that bureaucratic explanation, but I just wanted to make that really clear.
Thanks for clarifying.
And we're not currently in danger of having a quorum of members or anything weird, right? We're good. 1, 2, 3.
I think we're good.
Okay, 4. Yeah.
Those of you who are familiar with the Open Meetings Act, it is very stringent, and we're trying to avoid even the appearance of violating that act. We don't want to discredit the Forest Conservation Commission. Scott.
Well, let's jump right into it. Yeah.
Sort of a background rationale type of question, Scott, that I was hoping you could clarify. So a definition like this, does it have legal standing? Is that the goal? Or is it going to be open to interpretation for legislators?
It technically wouldn't by statute have any legislative standing unless it's incorporated into a particular statute. Or municipal zoning ordinance, for example, that would give it some standing. But right now, the way we're putting this together, it wouldn't necessarily have any legal standing, no.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'll go next. I'm Kate. I'm leaving my camera off because my internet is a little spotty. I have some significant concerns with using the term old growth forest. I love the idea of using Rhode Island, a term such as Rhode Island's oldest forests. And I think the approach is really sound, looking at those old 1938 photographs for forest and then comparing them with our land use cover today. I think that's a great first start. I'm just really concerned with having a definition that's very open to interpretation, and then having that definition go kind of haywire. I personally was really excited about the prospect of finding some old growth in Rhode Island, and then realized that there's probably none. And I think if we can steer away from using that term and maybe steer it towards Rhode Island's oldest and most venerable forests, I'm okay with that. But that term old growth is kind of like a push button for me, and I'd steer clear of it personally. Especially if it doesn't meet a specific scientific definition, you know what I mean?
Kate, I think that's really good feedback and something that the commission has been going back and forth on for many months. But I think we need to certainly worth revisiting that. Kate, did you have any other thoughts or?
Well, I did send quite a detailed comment letter. I marked up the draft that you sent along. That was sort of my most knee-jerk reaction. I like the inclusion of different forest types. One of my suggestions was, June is the season of mountain laurel blooming, and you have to go pretty far afield in Rhode Island to find a forest that has a significant understory of mountain laurel. I would consider not just overstory species when considering your most important forest category. I think understory supporting species, shrub species, or even like certain types of ground cover species. Like if we know particular forests really are harboring, maybe they weren't tilled as extensively and they have like a good native wildflower population underneath there. And maybe that's too specific, but I think a really easy one that you can see on aerial photographs that would be fairly easy to map, that Rhode Island DEM mapped as part of their new wetland types, is this broadleaf shrub evergreen criteria. And I think it would be relatively easy to include that as a forest type, especially given how hard it is to find. You have to go pretty far afield to find blooming mountain laurel. And a plane's flying over, so I am going to mute myself and let somebody else make a comment.
Brendan, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chris. I just wanted to say that to Scott and everybody on the commission, that I thought the work you've done is really excellent, and it's an important topic you've taken on. And I thought, Scott, you communicated it very well. Two things that jumped into my mind were also, cultural landscapes and forests that might have some sort of unique archaeological history. And I think it probably gets captured under most important forest soil types, but also work to protect forests that have significant natural resource base for local timber economy. So for probably most productive forests for saw timber or. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brendan, just a question for you about that is thinking about how you would identify those forests over the long term. It's not just based on what's growing there now in terms of tree species or in a productive forest. Or is there a way that you'd other than soils that you think you could codify or identify that?
Well, I would think soils is probably our best criteria for that, but also proximity to local a sawmill or you know, perhaps forests and communities with that have a traditional you know, forest use component. I just think about this in the lens of, you know, the economic value that forests absolutely have in the state, and how we can you know, do more to leverage investment in working forests.
Gotcha. Thank you. Doug, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question about just the definition of urban forests. I'm a little hazy on the meaning here. As an urban forester, we've always considered the entire sort of tree canopy in an urban situation as the urban forest, from street trees to park trees, conservation districts, riverside, you know, everything, empty lots. And just looking at the definitions or subcategories below your definition, I was just a little confused about what you mean by urban forest in relation to sort of the overall most important forest, you know, the purpose of this. And so I'm wondering if you mean like urban woodland. I would call them urban woodlands, or the sort of subcategories that you had, like larger tracts of, you know, conservation land or riverside woodlands. So yeah, that's sort of my general question, what meant by the definition of urban forest.
Good comment. I think, to be honest, I think we're still struggling with that. So we had a conversation. Let's take a community like Warwick. It's urban, but not as urban as, say, Providence, and they do still have some meaningful parcels of forest left. So we're thinking if communities like that have 10 acres or more, that's an area that you know, 80% of Rhode Island's population lives within that urban service boundary. Those urban forests certainly don't have the same kinds of values that you might find out in forests outside the urban service boundary. But because so many more people have access to it, it might be the only place they're going to connect with even more urban habitat. It might be an area where they can get away from a busy neighborhood and take a quiet walk. There might be some hiking trails through there. Those areas have value, I think, was our thought process, because so many people can gain easy access to them. We did have a conversation about street trees, and we didn't know how to factor those in, but I think that's where the tree canopy cover comes in to some degree. But again, we'd welcome your feedback on this, and I think this is probably the one part, the one forest type that probably needs the most work, and to date we've spent the least amount of time on it, but we were anxious to go out and get feedback.
I'd be glad to, you know, work on it with you in the future. It's probably going to take more work than what we could talk about here. Just off the bat, I'm thinking urban woodland is more along the definition of the way you described it. Otherwise, an urban forest is a very broad term. I also think the whole urban forest is one of the most important forests in Rhode Island. So I'm glad to sort of hash it out with you if I could be involved.
Welcome your feedback.
Doug, just to clarify a little more about urban woodland, by that, would you mean a forest which originated on its own and has been there, or the land has been there, with undisturbed soils, essentially, as the urbanized area has grown up around it, as opposed to a large planted or landscaped area, for example?
Yeah, it's not planted, it's managed, but sort of self-sustaining. That's normally what I think of as an urban woodland. Whereas the rest, the entire other parts of the urban forest are planted, you know, the downtown areas, street trees are maintained. So I was just looking at, you know, like for you to say there needs to be a contiguous tract of, what was it, 10 acres or something? I can't remember. How does that fit into the definition of urban forest? You know, when it's in the entire city is has the urban forest within it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think I understand. Thanks. Bob, you had your hand up for quite a while there. I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to speak.
I appreciate that, Christopher, and I just I don't know how to get the icon up. Otherwise, I'd have shot it up there and raised my hand. But anyway, first of all, I very much appreciate everything that's going on here with this with all these definitions. Everybody's doing a pretty darn good job of it. My opinion, again, it's my opinion, but I have been in the woods for 50 years, so it might be worth more than 2 cents. But 100% of every forest is very important to me. No matter whether you're have a management plan on it, harvesting it, or just enjoying it outdoors, forestry for the birds or whatever. So to me, 100% of the forest is important. Urban forest, I heard Scott mention preservation earlier when he was talking about urban forest. So that's a little scary to me, as far as if you do have a continuous 10 acres or more, and there are plenty of spots around that are urbanized and do have decent forests, like in Warwick and East Greenwich and Providence and so forth, so on, Johnston, that can be harvested. There is timber value in there. Not that you're going to clear cut it by any means, but there is management that could be done in there to make it a working forest. And the last thing is protection of landowners' rights. That's a scary situation to me with these definitions. So if you're going to protect or preserve that 10-acre forest in the urban setting, and I know this isn't the duty of the Forest Commission to enforce this or to write up a statute on this. However, down the pipe could be a problem with definition, where if a landowner wants to do something with their trees in their backyard, they want to clear for a fence, or they want to clear for a shed, so forth, so on. How is that going to affect the landowner at that point in time if that 10 acres is part of this urban forest?
Bob, all good points to consider. And again, I want to make it clear, we haven't had any discussions about turning this into any kind of a regulatory program. And I think I could speak for the commission in saying that would probably be one of the last things that we would support.
Sorry.
Thanks, Bob. Those points are noted.
Thank you.
I see Lou Aller's hand up as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on the urban forest definitions as well. And actually, just coincidentally, we Rhode Island hosted the National Association of State Foresters Urban Forester Committee meeting, their annual meeting this yesterday and the day before. And we had a speaker from the Natural Areas Conservancy speak to talk about their Forests and Cities program. And they do define those forests within the city. They call them forested natural areas. And there's a Forest and Cities network that has a ton of really great resources specifically for those types of forested areas, as opposed to the full urban forest. And yeah, I agree with Doug. That's typically how we would define urban forest, is all the trees in the city. So, but I have a link here if you guys want to check it out. And just one other thing I wanted to mention was with the tree equity score goal of 70. I caution using a specific number with that because of just the nature of the tool. They're constantly revising it. They're working on a tree equity score 2.0 that's going to be coming out shortly. They're actually changing some of the calculations. So a 70 today might be different from a 70 later. So I think it might be better to go for, the idea is to have a tree equity score of 100 because that's actually equity. So you could have a starting point of 70, but that end point is really what the goal should be. But yeah, that's what I got.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Doug, did you have some more that you wanted to say? Is the hand so okay? Anyone else can feel free to speak up or chime in.
If people have thoughts or comments that they'd like to send after this meeting, if you think of something, by all means, please forward, you can shoot me an email, copy TJ, Christopher. The more feedback we can get, the better. The goal is to make this as good as we possibly can. It's never going to be perfect, but the more feedback, the more people looking at it, the more people commenting, only improves the final product.
So in addition to potentially contributing some written feedback or comments, Scott, is there anything else that you'd suggest to folks who may want to follow the process along as the definition gets revised and solidified?
Yes, I know. Thanks to DEM, they did set up a website for the Forest Conservation Commission. We can actually post documents on that website now, is my understanding. So hopefully, as we get different iterations of this, that can be posted there so people could follow it, or just reach out to us. That's be happy to share the most recent iteration.
Right. So some of those documents will be available on the Forest Conservation Commission's website. That's going to be going online and available from you as well as the chair. Just wanted to provide one more opportunity if anyone else has input or feedback before we shift over to updates. Scott, was that your hand there, Scott Rowan?
That was my real hand, yes. More general question, Scott. When you were tasked and the commission was tasked to do this definition, do you have a size or word limit in mind? Because a lot of these definitions I feel almost need a glossary within a glossary, like self-perpetuating. Like, I mean, to me, that's so ambiguous. Or rare forest types, it sounds a very exclusive list. I almost feel like you should put in what's the legal phrasing we use a lot in our documents? It's something like not mutually exclusive, may include the following. That, let's say some other forest type comes up. Are you going to be able to amend this definition?
Scott, all good points. Certainly, I think once we get this out there, start working with it, I think we're going to get some probably further feedback that would indicate that it probably needs further amendments. And I think we're certainly open to that. We don't see it as being a hard and fast definition that can't change. And that's why it's probably good that it's not in a statute. As far as further clarification, I strongly agree. Particularly if any definition is going to be used for regulatory purposes in a state or municipal ordinance, you're going to have really clear terms. Otherwise, it could be litigated. And my experience with litigation like this, if terms are ambiguous, usually the person challenging the definition prevails. So we'd have to put a lot more detail. But right now we just want to, and we know that, but I think right now we want to start off with what's a good framework for developing this definition. And once people agree, then I think we have to fill in the details that you're referring to. And that could be a continuous process.
I mean, even the word important makes me very nervous as a scientist. What what is truly important? It's very, very ambiguous, obviously. But you don't want it so long that it just sits on a shelf unused. I've been on a lot of committees where we generate spiral bound 300-page documents and they don't get used. So I understand you have to balance use versus just bureaucracy. Just my editorial comment.
No, that's good feedback, Scott, and I think we all agree.
Well, thank you, Scott Millar, for taking the time to walk us through the process and the definition this afternoon and provide, as the RI Woodland Partnership, we're just trying to provide a forum for sharing information and discussion of all kinds of different important forest issues. That's how the Woodland Partnership fits in. We don't have a direct relationship with the Forest Conservation Commission, even as some of us serve as members. Well, now I think we'll transition and move into policy and legislative updates. It is mid-June, so it's high season on the policy and legislative front. And I'm hoping that some of our partners who are more active on that front may be up for providing a description of where things are now and commenting on that.
It's the last day of the session. Woo, woo.
The last day.
Today is it. I just checked, there are no other meetings scheduled. So what do you want to know? Let's see. The Forest Fire Study Commission passed out of the House. That's a thing that's going to be happening. The sub A, Bob, you can take this on forest parity, went from a tax related bill basically to a license plate, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have to get, I guess, definition or a better explanation on that sub A as to what the parity actually means, because there's some language in there that I don't quite understand, and I can't get a hold of legal to speak with them on it to give me an exact definition. If you read into it deep enough, it does say that we do have parity with the farmers, but yet they took out the deletion of taxation. So what are we going to get, a vanity plate?
I think what if you look in there, there's one positive thing that we did get out of it was that forest-based businesses,
correct,
have the same treatment as farm-based businesses in the communities. So it's just like a right to farm, right to have a farm stand.
That's correct.
Well, this is a right to have a sawmill in your backyard and sell the lumber off your out of the back of your pickup truck if you'd like to. So that is in there, and I think if it didn't accomplish anything else, that I think was pretty important. And I know Scott Millar, you've done some work in the past with the planning on with communities on these forest-based businesses, and I think with what that one sentence, that one phrase in that legislation, it covered that.
Yes.
So one clarification, though, it was only introduced on the House side. There was not a Senate companion introduced. So this did not move forward this year. So it's not a law. It's not going to be a law.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in the meantime, maybe the League of Cities and Towns won't pick up on this forest-based zoning and have and try to object to it next year. Yes.
Did that happen? Did I miss that?
What?
Did the league object?
No, I'm saying hopefully that they
Okay.
it won't give them a year to find out about it, and they won't object to it.
I also, if you, I don't know, we can talk offline about how to ideas for what to do with bills, but What else? The amended version of one of the solar siting bills did pass both the House and the Senate last night. That would prevent incentives for solar development in core forests of over 250 acres. The bill changed a lot from the original one that was introduced. There's a lot less megawatts in terms of the virtual net metering development, and that program will be phased out by 2030, I believe. So there's a cap. What else is, so we also got $2.5 million appropriated somehow for farmland conservation, which does actually also affect forest land. Most farmsteads do have forests on them. And this is huge news, especially because if we didn't have any of this funding, we wouldn't be able to do farmland conservation for the next 2 years in the state of Rhode Island. We have dwindled that pot of funding down completely. Still have no idea how we managed to pull that one off, but it's pretty huge. And that, I think those are the four. Am I missing anything specific to forests? Anything else specific to forests? That's big. No. Our liberal interpretation bill that would direct courts who in the future would have to look at the legality of our conservation easements. Strengthens that language in our enabling legislation that passed this year. That's pretty big. It's not sexy, but it's a big deal for anyone who's conserving lands in Rhode Island using conservation easements. The bottle bill is now a study commission, but it's a joint study commission. What else?
Hey, there's the Renewable Ready program, but I don't think we'll know until tonight if it's passed or not.
So that directs the state of Rhode Island to invest in making previously disturbed sites pad ready for development.
Thanks, Kate, for running through all of those things. So I guess we can all take a look at our news source at midnight tonight and see, see what's happened. See where
and let's just hope that all these bills get signed and not vetoed.
Indeed. In terms of policy, anything else that anybody may want to discuss that's may not be directly related to the current state legislative session, but maybe at another level of government or more ongoing? Just wanted to provide a space for that. Brendan.
Thank you. I am aware and was just recently informed of this last week of a new federal forest conservation easement program that's been proposed by Representative Trent Kelly, I think out of Kentucky. And it would be included in the new farm bill. And this would, I think they're seeking about $100 million. And this would be funneled through NRCS, I think, Kate, is that right?
Yes.
So I don't know if it will become part of the final farm bill, but we should know sometime later this year.
Yeah, let me look through my inbox because I've been meaning to share a link where you can read more about what's being proposed and weigh in. So we have access. The only other forest specific NRCS program is Healthy Forest Reserve, and we don't have access to that program in Rhode Island. This essentially models the agricultural land easements, but specifies these easements for forest related projects.
Which is really a great tool for Rhode Island. Right now we only have the Forest Legacy Program and then our CPP and Healthy Forest Reserve, which is not every year.
Well, what can I ask what impact on Forest Legacy Program? Because the U.S. Forest Service, here we go back 20 years ago, funded forest land improvements through their Forest Legacy Enhancement Program and Stewardship Incentive Program. And then NRCS came into the picture. Now they're the dominant and they seem to be, at least around here, the dominant funding source for management practices and stand improvements in the forestry theater. So we've had this forest legacy program. I'm not sure if every state participates in the forest legacy program or not, but
Every state but North Dakota.
oh, interesting. Okay.
North Dakota does not recognize perpetual conservation easements within their state laws. They're only good for 30 years.
Oh, okay.
And so the Forest Legacy Program has made continued outreach effort to try and get them to join as a fee simple acquisition program for their own state division of forest environment. But North Dakota has remained a holdout.
But anyway, what so here we go again with a kind of a shift in the funding sources from the Forest Service to another sister USDA agency, the NRCS. You know, I don't know what's behind all that. Why can the Forest Service not get the money out efficiently enough, and NRCS thinks that they're in a better position to do so? Okay.
Can I just say, even though we put in applications for Forest Legacy, that does not mean we're going to get Forest Legacy dollars. And we are required to come up with a pretty significant match for that program. And often we can't do that. What this does is model the agricultural land easement program. So it's just a set aside pot of funding to do easements on private lands, essentially, in working forests.
That's exactly.
More favorable conditions. Less match.
What was that?
Less match, perhaps. Or
well, it would operate based on the restrictions. So, like, how restrictive is the deed on the forest land? How are you harvesting wood, or are you not, or are you doing restoration? I'm not an expert in what the details of the program are, but if it models ALE, it generally requires some match provided by a land trust or other conservation organization, but that frees up a lot. We're able to utilize those fundings or that batch of funding in a lot more places in the state of Rhode Island, I would argue. I don't even think it's a direct competition, because if this does pass and we are able to access this funding, then we don't we can still do legacy projects, you know what I mean? When we have the match and when we have a combined multiple parcel of property that meets all the requirements.
Yeah, legacy has become very competitive across the country. There's a lot of good things that are happening out of legacy, and the Great American Outdoors Act did identify it did secure perpetual permanent funding for the legacy program through the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and that allotment's at about $80 million a year that they're able to grant to states and territories. And legacy is really two parts. So there's the land protection work, but they also provide state administrative grants, which are typically around $40,000-$50,000 a year, and that is specifically for planning. And so you know, that's also important, and those funds can be used for a number of different important things, whether that be education materials or staffing. But there is some pretty significant news out of legacy through the Inflation Reduction Act, and I think this jumps into our partner updates. Chris,
while we're talking about easements, go ahead.
Yeah, so I will just briefly share a screen with some dates. And so I hope you can see that. So I'm sorry about the blurry screen. So there's going to be 3 Forest Legacy project rounds. So this is applications to the federal program for funding for fee acquisitions on forest land or conservation easement acquisitions on forest land. The fiscal year 2025, all the way to the left here, is just the conventional LWCF round, which we have an open grant in the Situate Reservoir for right now, which you're aware of, Mark. And then there are 2 supplemental rounds that are going to occur in the next 12 months. which are drawing down Inflation Reduction Act funds. And the first will be January or so of 2024, and the second June of 2024. So we are actively looking for projects to submit to the Forest Service. The Inflation Reduction Act grant funds will not be congressionally ranked, so the awards will happen much quicker. The LWCF funds do have to get approved by Congress, and so that creates kind of a significant delay for the Forest Service to be able to get these grant agreements out the door. So it's an exciting time, and if you are aware of a great project in your community, we, by all means, we'd be really interested in learning more about it and putting it forward to the State Forest Stewardship Coordinating Committee for their review and ranking.
Thanks, Brendan. Appreciate having that helpful and detailed update. Well, this seems to be an opportune time to segue into our more general round of updates. And for those of you who have an update that you'd like to share on your work or important things that are going on in this forest sphere affecting Rhode Island, feel free to jump in and share. Well, I'll share one update. I heard from a steering member of the Land and Sea Together program, which provides federal funding through the state to farming, fishing, and forest industries, largely for stress assistance and business support. It's a program that originated during the height of the pandemic. There's funding available for business supports, because business planning, repairing vehicles or equipment, childcare support for people working in those industries needs that, and a host of other things. But I understand that to date, not many businesses in the forest sector have taken advantage of this opportunity. It's really been folks who are more working in farming and fishing who have been participating, who perhaps may be a bit more familiar with some of those programs, but wanted to throw a link in the chat here. But if you haven't considered it yet, and you have a forest business, encourage you to do so. I think this is important for the Rhode Island Wood Producers Association, perhaps RIFCO and other forest organizations that have ties to the private sector to get this out there, since the funds are there and real, and we don't want to be left out of these sorts of initiatives in the future. So just passing that along from one of the steering committee members. Bob. Oh, I think you're muted there.
Sorry about that. Is there only one round of payment on that, or is there multiple rounds? Do you know?
There has been more than one round, and I'm not sure of the details. I know that the folks who are running and administering the program are happy to explain it to potential participants in ways that it could help them. It is quite a user-friendly program.
It's pretty cool, like from things like car repair all the way to getting 12 visits with a therapist or a doctor. Like there's all sorts of ways to access that program, and it's meant for people who are farmers or working in the forest. So people who are logging, people, you know what I mean? It's open to everyone. And actually, we're all technically qualified for these funds as well if we need them, because we're working in the industry.
Yeah, I understand. I appreciate that. I did apply, and they did give me a small stipend, so to speak, a small payment when we had the fire.
Mm-hmm. Good. and my understanding is that they're trying to spread the resources around to different individuals and businesses as much as possible, rather than larger grants, which makes sense. So there are more opportunities there, and there's a limited amount of information that individuals or businesses need to share as well. So that's something that you can pass along too. It's not like you need to share your tax returns or anything like that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anyone else? Melissa.
Yeah, just a quick update. Brendan mentioned RCPP. So Joe in our office and Marina with the district have been working on the Forest Health Works forest easements. So we did have a fair number of applications for those. I think we got a couple for entity held and then a bunch, maybe 30 or so for US held. So they're going to be getting those letters out, tentative like pre-selection letters soon, and then starting appraisals. So we expect to have that funding for, at least the next couple of years or so. And there is a fair amount of interest.
And we're starting outreach on that. June 27th is the first on the books event on Aquinic Island. We'll be working with RIFCO on succession planning and figuring out other ways to get the word out to forest landowners about that program.
Awesome.
Hey, what's it going on June 27th?
Joanne and Marina are working on planning a general outreach event.
Okay.
To capture the Tiverton and beyond folks.
Okay, was there something specific to the estate planning process?
No.
there?
This is not that.
Okay.
This is not that. This is just general. This is just starting general outreach, not the succession stuff.
Thanks.
Well, thanks, you guys. That's exciting to hear about the progress on the Forest Health Works RCPP in particular. Scott.
Yeah, hi again. We have one of these good news, bad news moments. Priscilla Dela Cruz is leaving Audubon to become the new Director of Sustainability for Providence. She's a wonderful asset, wonderful catch. Of course, we're going to be sad to see her go from Audubon. We're not sure how her commission work's going to change. All these types of things we're working on. She extended her regrets about not attending today. I imagine with her role, she may or may not be part of this group anymore. So change going on at Audubon. On the good news front, I have about 7 active acquisition projects totaling about 500 acres of forest in Rhode Island. A 300-acre tract in North Kingstown is our biggest one. That's going to be an outright donation if everything goes through and we dot our I's and cross our T's. I can't divulge. I tend to keep these things confidential until we finally close, but it's really exciting. It's mostly South County, ranging from some scrubby 10 acres in Coventry down along South Kingstown, Great Swamp area, all the way over to Shermantown area. So that's good news. So fingers crossed. No old growth, sorry to disappoint. There are some old dying beaches, but I wouldn't say it's old growth.
Oh.
Thanks, Ben. Passing this along.
Speaking of, for those who haven't seen it, the Wildlands report came out a couple weeks ago. Feel free to take a look. Highstead put it out. Christopher, do you want to say anything else about that?
So part of the Wildlands and Woodlands, Farmlands and Communities initiative, which first originated with, was within the state of Massachusetts, Harvard Forest and Highstead, I believe, jointly coordinated now. And, all 4 of those land use types are an important part of the vision. I understand there's going to be more reports coming out about, woodlands, for example, as well. But the Wildlands report does call for increasing the amount of unmanaged forest lands in New England from 10 possibly up to 20%, if I understand correctly, over the next 50 years or so. And there's also some sort of state specific inventories and reports on the extent of wildlands in the different state. And I'm uncertain as to the precise methodology, but compared to some of the other New England states, they did only identify one single wildland property in Rhode Island, happens to be Oakland Forest on Quidnick Island. I think a number of us Rhode Islanders have some questions about how they arrived at that, and would also benefit us to learn more about the reports, its implications and possible policy initiatives. So I think we might invite someone for a virtual presentation in the fall, perhaps, among other topics. But I think everyone who works on forest issues in Rhode Island should be aware of that. If you do a search for wildlands and woodlands, it'll bring up a link to the report pretty quickly, and encourage you to at least read the executive summary. Paul.
We're still working on forestry for the birds. We have a walk this afternoon over at Fisherville with Laura Codberry from Audubon. So it's still out there. We're still doing programs on it. And I'd also like to put a plug in for Women Owning Woodlands. We're having a chainsaw safety course October 14th and 15th. So if any of you ladies are interested in learning how to operate a chainsaw, please contact me.
Thanks, Paul. On the topic of forest walks, I'm going to be with Doug Still and the Rhode Island Forest Walks series. I'm going to be leading a public tour to the Adaptive Silviculture for Climate Change replicate site at DEM's Hillsdale Preserve in Richmond, where there are 3 different types of treatments intended to promote forest resiliency, along with an unmanaged control, are soon to be implemented. And this is a chance for people to walk the woods there, for the treatments are implemented, and also a good opportunity for any landowners, land trust representatives, members of the interested public who may have questions or suspicions about how forestry and active management could help with building resiliency. And this is a chance for them to we'll come on out and talk about the project and have a discussion in the woods. That's the first of 2 walks. This will be on Wednesday, June 28th is the first one. And then there'll be a Rhode Island Land Trustees walk in July. Cindy.
Hi, everybody. Speaking of forest walks, I just wanted to bring up, so our next meeting looks like it's going to be at the Queens River Preserve. We have a walk scheduled, I believe, right?
Yes. On this would be on July 20th.
Yep. We have traps set right there for the CAPS program, right where we're slated to park. So I was wondering if maybe I could show you guys the traps, and so you guys could see the CAPS program in action before going to see the forest fire stuff in action. So
what are these traps for, Cindy?
These are for exotic beetles and moths, which we hopefully don't have here, but it's a monitoring program. And I usually work with a nature conservancy to set up some traps, and Scott suggested maybe setting them up there this year because he wanted to see if having all of that activity might bring new pests in. So I thought it was a cool idea to set them up there this year.
All that activity, you mean burned wood?
Yeah, but also having people coming in there, and I think it brought in more the public that's curious. Seems like that area has been more active. And we're doing a pine survey this year, so that whole entrance is a lot of pine, so it worked out perfect for us. And I was also thinking about inviting my interns with me so that they can see like the bigger picture of why we do this stuff, to meet everybody and kind of like see the whole complete picture of why we care about our forests. So that's about it. My other updates are just that we have our traps out, but I'll get to show you that, guys, that next month. So I'm excited to see that. And it's a good excuse for me to get out of the office.
Glad we'll be able to include that in the walk. Super.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's about it. Thanks, guys.
Lou.
Hi. So just a quick update with our Inflation Reduction Act project. I don't know if I've even updated you on this. So with the Inflation Reduction Act had allocated $1.5 billion for urban community forestry nationwide. And as part of that, they had an initial round of funding directly to states that ended up being $250 million. From that, we were allocated $1.2 million to do a program that we're going to be working with Green Infrastructure Center to do community capacity building in urban forestry within cities and towns that are defined as disadvantaged, have defined disadvantaged areas as according to their tool. So as part of that, they are actually already have a job posting for a community or 2 community urban forester positions to work on the project. So I have that link. I'll post it to the chat in a second. If anybody wants to share that out, definitely be great to get that spread around. So after that initial allocation to the states, they also had a full notice of funding opportunity for up to $1 billion. And I know a number of organizations within Rhode Island had applied for that. And I just had an update that apparently over 800 organizations had applied, and for over $6 billion worth of projects. So it should be an interesting competitive process coming through that we'll hear more about, and hopefully get some more exciting projects in the state here. So yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Lou. Mark.
From RIFCO, we typically do a summer walk, and we call it the summer twilight walk. It's typically the early August, a weekday evening. And this year, we contemplated perhaps doing it in conjunction with the Woodland Partnership, but it's not working out. You've got other things going on, and we tend to have more of a late afternoon, early evening session. So I did talk to Mr. Pezza, who is one of the property owners on the west side of the river, across the river from the Nature Conservancy property, where the fire did burn intensely through there. He is willing to host both the Woodland Partnership at our walk. Just have to walk across the bridge and we're on his land. And the RIFCO summer twilight session, which would probably be the 10th of August that evening, which will be advertised publicly. And we can handle more people over there parking. There's no gravel bank we can park cars in. And so we don't have to really limit, other than how many people can you have on a walk in the woods, right? But it's wide open in there. There's certainly no understory to block people from seeing through the woods. And so that's where we'll be doing our walk on probably the 10th at this point. But I just want to say, we do our monthly e-news, and if anybody has any walks coming up for the month of July and August, and then we'd be happy to post them on our e-news. So just send them along to me, info@rifco.org. So hopefully we'll see you all at one of those walks. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Good to be getting outside with these walks season for that. Kate.
Speaking of walks, I I know it's only June, but land trustees, we kick that off on August 25th. For those who don't know, land trustees is about 2.5 months of walks planned on land trusts across the state, not just land trusts. We also incorporate other properties. So if you want to host a walk that highlights, forest practices, please send that along. We would love to plan that and get people out to see what it is that we actually do. I would also like to plug the RI Walks Challenge, which for those of you who don't know, we have 34 creatures hidden on trails across Rhode Island. We are about to send out a press release this afternoon, and you probably will see some wanted posters in your communities that have those creatures on those trails. And if you do complete the challenge, it is likely that there will be great prizes like Mead donuts or beer. So just saying, you might want to take the challenge this summer. That's it. That's what I got.
Sounds like you need to go out and hit the trails again if you win a prize. Any other updates?
Mark, do you have another update?
All right. Just want to let everyone know, remind everyone that our new the 2023 to 25 strategic plan is now posted on the Woodland Partnership page on the Rhode Island Woods website for you to check out or share. And once again, want to remind you of the section of the plan that seeks to build the capacity of the partnership by leveraging grant or other funding to hire someone who can help run the affairs of the partnership part-time. We know that this is what some of the other partnerships in parts of New England that are most successful at conserving land and increasing stewardship are able to do. So please have your eyes out for opportunities which we might be able to write in a role for the Woodland Partnership, and that person could also work on advancing other goals that are part of that project. And then lastly, just our meeting next month will be the field trip to the Queens River Preserve, and it will leave a trip across the river to the Pezza property. It's going to be from 1 to 3 p.m. on that Thursday, July 20th. Apologies for the registration form snafu issues with the one that got sent out with the previous email. Kate and I will iron that out and get another one out. But rest assured, if you indicated an interest in participating in that trip, got you on the list. Just wanted to be sensitive to the Nature Conservancy's concerns about wanting to have a manageable group size on the property, since it seems like there is a lot of interest. So we will follow up about that soon.
Hey, Chris, sorry to interrupt. Would it be a problem if I brought my 2 interns? Because I didn't think about the limited number.
I think I'm gonna reach back out to Cheryl and Tim at the Nature Conservancy and just confirm with them or see what they're comfortable with in terms of a cap size on the group. This will be an addition to themselves, and people are hosting or leading the event, I believe. But we'll circulate another form fairly soon. And if you're going to be showing us those your work on the property, you're involved in leading the tour essentially.
Oh, thank you.
And hoping that you can get your interns out there too.
Hey, Christopher, if it's a matter of parking, because I know it's not a very big area to park with on that road. I don't even remember the name of that road. School Woods Road or something. You know, Ray said, hey, you know, if you want to come in and park on his property. So, and it's not that long of a walk, so we could do some overflow parking at Ray's, and then, you know, then we could walk over and meet the group at the beginning of the walk. So if it gets to that point and that's the bottleneck, then let me know. I can make arrangements for that.
All right.
That
Check it on that.
also, I imagine if we were creative, we could find a Dunkin' Donuts or something that's fairly close and work on
Carpool.
carpooling. Yeah,
Why Dunkin' Donuts?
I don't know. That's the first thing that came to mind.
No, there's the brewery is right up the road.
Oh, yeah, that. We can park right at the brewery. I like the way you think, Mark.
Sounds like either would be popular with the Rhode Island crowd. All right, well, I think this brings us to the end of the meeting. Thanks to all of you for the robust participation today. And again, to Scott for your presentation on the definition of Rhode Island's forests as that moves forward. Hope you all have a good rest of the afternoon, and see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.